The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the bonus show. There's a soccer player, the captain of the MLS team Philadelphia Union, Alejandro Bedoya, who is calling on Congress to enact gun control legislation, called on them to enact gun control legislation during a televised game on Sunday. He scored a goal against DC United, ran to a microphone on the field, and shouted, "Hey, Congress, do something now, end gun violence, let's go," before jumping back into the game. And he also tweeted, "Seeing more thoughts and prayers, bullshit. Words without actions are just worthless. America, it seems, is becoming a dystopian society. Do something. Enough." Later tweeting, "I'm not a policymaker either. I'm shouting at those hypocrites to get their shit together. You want some plans? We can start with stricter background checks, red flag laws, making a registry for gun purchases, closing gun show loopholes, and taxing ammunition. Better for you?" I think that this is great. And of course, you always hear people say, "Oh, keep politics off the sports field," or whatever. My view on this has always been the same, and I don't care whether it's a left-wing or a right-wing athlete. They can use whatever platform they have by being athletes, however they want to use it, running the risk that their employer may have a problem with it and they'll have to deal with their employer, that fans may be turned off and stop going to see them play. But it's their call ultimately. And you know what? If you don't like what he's calling for, don't go to Philadelphia Union games anymore, or whatever it is that you want to do. But I will... it is a privileged position, whether you're an actor or an athlete or whatever, to use, to be able to have a platform from which you can do advocacy. And I will never say that they shouldn't be doing it. Now, what I have said, Pat, is when, for example, football broadcaster Al Michaels made a comment during a broadcast game of the New England Patriots about John Kerry being a flip-flopper, I think that his employer should not allow him to do that if the point is for him to be telling us what's happening in the football game. But ultimately, that's up to his employer to decide. Like, I didn't like it. I want a particular experience. And you can say, well, I'm a hypocrite. I'm okay with the players saying something and not the play-by-play guy. This is the point. It's up for each of us to decide, what are we okay with? What are we not okay with? And to go from there.
Yeah, I totally agree there. And I think that people like to assume that we can just kind of watch our sports or watch our daytime television and not have it be infiltrated by politics. But it's just how it is. Like, politics affects everything in our lives, from healthcare to gun violence. There's really no escaping it. And I think that we have to kind of accept that. And if an athlete wants to make a point like Alejandro did here, I think that's totally fine. I think it's a great thing that he did there. It's also interesting how right-wingers always talk about how they want to keep politics off the field, that they want to hear about politics from celebrities, musicians, what have you. But then every time that they find a right-wing celebrity, athlete, musician, whatever it may be, then they embrace them. Like,
well,
Kurt Schilling or Kanye West
in
recently.
those cases, they'll say, listen, there are so few of these people that they should have a voice as well, because conservative politics are so rare. There's a lot of conservative athletes. That's the truth. I understand that in Hollywood, it's more liberal. I get that. There are plenty of conservative athletes and whatever else. It's like, come on, pick either you want politics in these other areas or you don't. Clint Eastwood as a Republican, or John Voight, or whoever else. It's like, you either want the politics or you don't, but it can't just be, well, I want the Republican politics because they're so rare and oppressed within entertainment or sports.
Yeah, and the consequences for celebrities speaking their mind are often severe, too. Like Colin Kaepernick protested the national anthem over police brutality. He can't get a position in the NFL anymore, even though statistically it's hard to believe that he's not one of the top 100 best quarterbacks in the country. So there often are repercussions for this. I don't think that we'll see any in this case, but these people are going out there and making a statement, and if they think that it's worth it for them, I think we kind of have to take a step back and respect that they're willing to put it all out in the open, and people can interpret that how they wish.
So earlier this week, we talked about a bill that would put some very specific limits on social media functionality to try to curb addiction to platforms where you're scrolling, like Facebook and Twitter and others. There is now another movement that is looking more specifically at dating apps like Tinder and Bumble, where the problem is not so much the endless scrolling per se, but the addiction to the apps from people who are basically just extremely lonely. And there is, as a baseline, social media in general can fill the void of loneliness for people from a sort of basic on a basic level. If you then take a specific subset of these social apps, dating apps, meant presumably to find companionship of one kind or another, it can drastically scale up the way in which the loneliness leads to unhealthy use of endlessly swiping and rating people or whatever. And it goes beyond just using phones too much, according to researchers of this new study into loneliness and online dating websites. But it's people whose lives are being taken over by rating people and communicating with people on dating websites, such that it starts to get in the way of school, it starts to get in the way of work, etc. It is a compulsive use specifically of dating apps. And I mean, I don't think there's anything particularly surprising here, Pat. All of these technologies are meant to keep people's attention as long as possible and to scratch an unscratched itch, so to speak. And that's exactly what they are extraordinarily good at making people do with the design and user interfaces of these apps.
Oh yeah, they function like a game, and the reward system is just like a game too. I of course am not too familiar with dating apps like Tinder and Bumble, but from what I've gleaned from medical journals, it sounds as if whenever you match with someone, the person pops up big on the screen. And it's like, congratulations, you matched with this person, and then you like get to the messaging stage of it. It functions in the same way that like a video game would in a sense.
It's totally gamified.
Yeah, that reward system, I think, encourages people to get back on the app, to keep swiping. And again, not familiar with this, but what I've heard from friends and read online extensively is that if you're not using the app for a couple of days, it even like will send a notification to your phone to like get back on the thing and start swiping again. And it'll send you a notification saying that there's someone out there who has liked your profile. Start swiping so that you'll find out who that person is. And it makes sense how it can get addicting to some people. I'm not surprised by this at all.
There's another element of social anxiety, which is that for people who have one degree of social anxiety, the idea of being able to just kind of like choose people that you might be able to date online is appealing, and being able to correspond with them via messages where you can really think through what you want to say and you're not reacting in real time. For a certain level of social anxiety, that's appealing. But for people whose social anxiety is even more extreme, and I actually know a few of these people, the mere idea of having to do the chatting online causes so much anxiety that they don't even get on the apps. Like, the being on the app is what causes the social anxiety, because they're so scared of what would I say if I actually matched with someone. And that's like a more serious degree of social anxiety altogether.
Yeah, and it must be hell for that person once they actually have to meet the person that they've matched with, right?
Yes, of course.
Like once they go out on the first date and they've been talking for a while, like I'm sure there's a lot of anxiety associated with that. Maybe
I think
even
it just
more
never
so
happens
than
for
if
a lot
you,
of people. I think some people are just indefinitely sending messages and never meeting anybody.
That could be true too. But you know, if you meet someone in person, it's not necessarily like done in a way that's like that conveys romantic interest right off the bat. Like it's not like people are always meeting at a bar or a coffee shop with that kind of in their mind. Maybe they're meeting at work or at school or what have you. And so they can kind of like just become friends first and then like eventually get into a relationship where there's less anxiety associated with that. Whereas if you're meeting someone at a bar, coffee shop, or on a dating app, there is that anxiety associated with that. And that's definitely tough for people who live with these problems like anxiety.
It puts a certain amount of pressure where it's like everybody knows that they're there because they met on a dating app. And the whole point is to ascertain whether this might be a romantic relationship of one kind or another, which just adds to the pressure. In any case, and even not surprisingly, loneliness, anxiety, an even bigger problem with dating apps. We talk a lot about Donald Trump's public-facing statements as distraction techniques or having the effect of distraction, whether Trump intends it or not. And often when we talk about that, we say, what is it that we are being distracted from? And one of the things we're being distracted from regularly is the number of judges that Donald Trump has actually put in place. In the 2.5 years that Donald Trump has been president, his administration has now appointed almost 25% of the country's federal appeals court judges and 1 in 7 district court judges. This is a huge, huge influence on the judiciary of the United States. And my reactions are twofold. Number one, there is the, hey, we should be paying attention to this. This stuff matters, just like the Supreme Court. If you thought Hillary and Trump would be the same, this is something that is drastically different because Trump is president and Hillary is not. On the other side, the interesting thing to consider is that even despite the number of judges that Donald Trump has appointed, he still loses a lot of court decisions because he's doing things that are so obviously beyond the pale that even his appointees are not going to go for. And that's an interesting thing to consider as well here.
Yeah, but I think the future is definitely in favor of Republicans. I think eventually, if this keeps up, they'll have enough influence in all the different circuit courts that they'll be able to get their agenda passed without much problem.
Yes.
And part of the reason why this is able to happen is because Republicans obstructed Barack Obama's court choices, judge choices. It wasn't just Merrick Garland with the Supreme Court. It was also many of these lower district court level judges that they obstructed, left seats open, and then Trump was able to fill those seats. And now he takes credit for them as if it's some big accomplishment. But really, all he had to do was sign off and nominate these people. And yeah, I think this is a big problem, especially because most cases don't go all the way up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court only takes up a handful of cases each year.
Yeah.
Most cases are settled at this sort of district court level, if it even gets up that high, or the federal court level. And the fact that Republicans are taking over all of them, it just goes to show that we're in trouble, and Republicans have done a much better job strategically at playing politics over the past decade or so.
And Republicans are loving that even if they disagree with the stuff Trump publicly gets attention for, they know that there is just no attention being paid to the effect that Donald Trump is having on the judiciary. And to the extent that there is attention paid, it's almost exclusively Supreme Court, which, as we've talked about, is only a fraction and represents a tiny, 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 just incredibly small percentage of all cases. So this is why this stuff matters. It's not the sexiest stuff. It's not the most exciting stuff, but I'm making an effort to talk about it. We've talked about climate science research being buried. We talked about that earlier this week. We're talking about this, and I'll keep making an effort. I mean, what can I do, Pat? I can just do what I can do.
Yeah, I mean, it is a big issue in the country. I think it should have persuaded enough people who were tentative about voting for Hillary Clinton to just suck it up and vote for her, because you're not just impacting what the executive branch of the government is going to look like for the next 4 years. You're also influencing what the Supreme Court and the entire judiciary branch is going to look like. And that's significant. I mean, a lot of people thought that some people thought that Democrats would be able to take control of the Senate, or the filibuster wouldn't be getting rid of, so they would have been able to obstruct any justices put up by Trump. That didn't end up happening. He was able to put in 2 justices so far in the Supreme Court, and many, many others in these lower courts. And it's a big problem, and it's one that we're gonna have to deal with for the next few decades, because if you put a judge on the court who's 45, they can be on the court for the next 30, 40 years.
Yes, indeed. A couple of things to mention to you since it is the end of the week. Number one, we are here next week for a normal week. And then the week after is David Pakman Show summer vacation. Okay, it is a full staff vacation. We are going to be doing something different during that break. We are going to be doing themed new episodes. Okay, so things that we've done in the past during vacations. No new shows at all. Some people don't mind. Some people say, I really don't like that you don't publish anything when you're gone. Another thing we've done is guest hosts, and that requires everybody being on a different vacation schedule. And some people like it and some people don't, and there's always disagreement about the guest host. So not next week, but the week after, we are going to try something new altogether, which is each of the 5 days, there will be a new themed episode with a new introduction from me, and it will combine interviews and segments we've done on particular topics for an entire hour show. I'm going from memory here, Pat, but we will have episodes on capitalism versus socialism and our economic system, white supremacy and radicalization. I think climate change, is that also another one?
I don't know if that's one of them. I know conspiracy
theories,
automation,
and then I believe maybe climate is another one, or maybe energy is better said. In any case, this is another new idea. We're going to try it. I know not everybody will like it, but it's an idea for vacation week, and middle of August is sort of the common time, and then we've got a big fall ahead of us. I mean, this is we've got the election ramping up. We've got Donald Trump apparently again going to attempt to undo Obamacare completely and propose something else. So this will be our break before we get into the big fall political craziness. So that's number one. And then number two, we are not leaving YouTube or abandoning anything we're doing, but we are, as a sort of insurance policy, starting to grow our presence on Twitch, which is a YouTube competitor that is much more oriented towards live versus uploaded videos. So please follow us on Twitch at twitch.com/David Pakman. We've built up almost 10,000 followers there in just like the first 8 days on Twitch, which is unbelievable. It took us I want to say it took us like a year to get 10,000 followers on YouTube. And now we've been able to use that following to get to 10,000 followers on Twitch very quickly. And if you're an Amazon Prime subscriber, you can subscribe to us with Twitch Prime. You don't pay anything, but it counts as a subscription for us. Twitch subscriptions are $4.99 a month, but Amazon Prime gives you a free one every month called Twitch Prime. So you don't pay anything, but for us, it still counts like a $4.99 subscription. You can sign up by going to twitch.tv/David Pakman and clicking that purple subscribe button and subscribing with Twitch Prime. So that does it for this week. We'll have a whole new week of shows and bonus shows next week. Looking forward to seeing you then.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.